Hello and welcome to another episode of Ingamified. I am your co-host Juan Carlos Blanco, and I'm going to bring in my co-host Eric Sherk, the in-game innovator. We're going to hit on some big in-game handicapping scenarios from the last couple of weeks of NFL action. Eric, I know you want to jump right in to talk a little bit about the Steelers' George Pickens and what he did in Week 2 against the Browns.
Definitely. It was a crazy game. There's so much going on last week. Obviously, that was the Chubb injury game. But bottom line is this. George Pickens was catchless and obviously therefore yardless well into the second quarter. And at about the 6:05 minute mark of that quarter, just prior to that big 71-yard pass play, for the previous two plays, his over-under was 28 and a half 28 and a half receiving yards. And that's when I started to see some value. It was never had come all the way down from the 50s pregame. It was down to 28 and a half. And it wasn't because he was being shut down. It was because Kenny Pickett was having some issues getting him the ball or keeping the ball long enough for his routes to develop. So bottom line, I saw value at over 28 and a half. But then the 71-yard pass play and touchdown occurred. And at that point, what I'm thinking to myself is math-wise, okay, we're going to add 71 to the 28 and a half that was already there. And that should be 99 and a half. And we're right back where we started before the 71-yard touchdown. But instead, his new number that posted was 93 and a half. That was 6 yards less than what it would have been literally a minute earlier. And so at that point, when you get 6 yards of value in 1 minute time or less within a play or two, you automatically jump on that over 93 and a half. And he ended up finishing the game with 127 receiving yards on 4 receptions. So make sure you keep an eye on what the new number is after a big play. And if the number drops that significantly based on the previous number before the big play, you want to jump on that over, especially if you saw value beforehand.
Sounds good. And now moving on a little bit here to Week 3. Speaking of big plays, the Chiefs absolutely steamrolled the Bears 41-0 this past Sunday. Rookie Rashee Rice, a lot of big expectations coming into the season after he had a great senior year at SMU and going into that Chiefs offense. What did you see from him that it gave you some in-game handicapping value?
Well, one of the hardest things to handicap is in a blowout when either team is going to wave the white flag and start to take out their starters. And at 41-0, and Mahomes had already been dinged up, we know that most of the starters are coming out after that early third quarter touchdown that made it 41-0 at that point. And what happened here with Rashee Rice is there was no Richie James in the lineup on Sunday. And so even though Andy Reid wanted to take out most of his starters, he was going to have someone finish the game. It was either going to be Sky Moore and Justin Watson or Rashee Rice and I believe his name is Justin Ross.
Yeah, Justin Ross.
And so when you start looking at that standpoint, there's no way to know who it's going to be to finish the game. But the one thing you do know, someone's going to have to finish. At least 2 to 3 receivers are going to have to play the entire fourth quarter and most likely be playing with Blaine Gabbert. At that moment, as soon as that 41 points went up on the board, and we know it's about white flag time for the Chiefs, at that moment, Rashee Rice had 3 receptions, and his current over-under receptions was 3.5. To me, that was low-hanging fruit. Went ahead and jumped on the 3.5 because there was no Richie James. I figured that he was going to have to be one of the guys to finish the game, and he was, along with Sky Moore. Sky Moore and Rashee Rice both finished the game and got some garbage time statistics with Blaine Gabbert, and Rashee Rice ended up finishing with 5 receptions. So make sure you figure out who's missing and who's going to have to finish even in garbage time, and that's where the value was with Rashee Rice.
Yeah, excellent point. I mean, situational awareness is something that doesn't just apply to the players on the field. It can definitely apply to us as in-game handicappers also. I mean, that's a perfect example of just kind of being able to see the entire big picture as a handicapper to make prudent betting decisions. So excellent point there. Moving on to the Bengals. They were just in action, a night ago as we record this, and they finally got that first win of the season. Most of the focus, of course, has been on Joe Burrow, his injuries, his struggles. But in addition to Jamar Chase breaking out last night, Joe Mixon caught your eye. What was that all about?
He did, and it was great to see Chase get going and Burrow get going and the Bengals get that first win. But the big thing was, back to what you said, the situational handicapping. Once they did get that 19-9 lead, that 2-score lead, that was at the 7:13 mark in the fourth quarter. At that moment, Joe Mixon had 12 carries on the board, and his over-under at that point was 17.5. And this might have been a little bit earlier in that drive. Matter of fact, if you go back, I don't have the exact screenshots in front of me, but right around that field goal drive, the 54-yarder to make it 19-9, Joe Mixon was at 12 carries, and we're going into that salt-away 4-minute drill, run-heavy offense for the Bengals. And he had only had 13 carries in each of the first 2 weeks, meaning 13 in week 1 and 13 in week 2, 26 total. And yet his over-under, with 12 carries on the board with about 7 or 8 minutes left, his over-under was 17.5 carries. And I went ahead and jumped on the over 17.5 carries. Bottom line, because we know that he's going to have to salt away the rest of the game going forward. That's something that they have not been in that position until week 3, and he did go ahead and salt it away and finish the game with 19 carries. So when you recognize a situational handicap valuable moment like that, you want to go ahead and understand what they're going to do, and they're going to run the ball and not pass it to salt it away, and they did that with Mixon, and he went from 12 to 19 to finish the game and cashed out the over 17.5.
Yeah, and again, situational awareness there too, and knowing the personnel, something you've talked about before, the importance of knowing who's on each team, the coaching tendencies, and so forth. In this case, no more Samaje Perine in Cincinnati. They do have Travion Williams, Chase Brown, Chris Evans. All of them, for various reasons, have very sparse NFL experience. Mixon really hasn't been overused early in the season, so probably a good bet that he's kind of kept in there as a trustworthy piece to salt the game away, as you said. And it was actually 6:01 remaining when that drive started that you were referring to. So a little bit less time, maybe a little bit riskier in the bet that you took, but nevertheless it worked out, which is the important thing, of course. So. And staying with Monday night to kind of wrap this one up, Jalen Hurts, big game all the way around. Going up against the Bucs, which stopped the run very well. We knew he was probably going to have a heavy passing day. So what did you see there?
Well, the big thing with him is that Todd Bowles is a very prideful, stingy coach, as many coaches are, but especially the old timers. And after what they did deep against the Vikings the previous week, meaning the Eagles, hit those 2 deep balls to Devontae Smith, and we're really just working the long length side of the value spectrum, getting the ball down the field. Todd Bowles is going to attempt to take that away. And in that same game against the Vikings, when DeAndre Swift is probably still stacking up rushing yards against the Vikings, what did he finish with, like 170 or
175? Yeah.
Okay, and so Todd Bowles, prideful again, is going to try to take that away. So what does that leave? Going into this game as potential pregame value that we can look for in game? That leaves the short stuff. And his over-under for completions, Jalen Hurts, going into the game was 20.5. And I believe in week 1 he had 22 completions, and in week 2 he had 18. So this number is kind of right in between the two of those. And if Todd Bowles does take away the deep stuff, or try to take away the run game, then that low-hanging fruit is the short yardage receptions. And it took a little bit longer to get there in the rain and some stalled-out drives, but I took the over when he was at 3 completions. Remember, his pregame number was over 20.5. When Jalen Hurts was at 3 completions on that first drive, his in-game over-under was still 21.5. We went ahead and locked that in at over 21.5, and he finished the game with 23. So it was a little bit of a sweat, but the value was still there because Todd Bowles did attempt to take away the deep stuff, and he did attempt to take away the run game, at least in the first half, but he wasn't able to stop it in the second half. But luckily at that point, Hurts was already beyond the halfway mark to get to his 22 completions.
Absolutely. And once again, knowing the coach, this time knowing the coach on the opposite sideline and what he probably will tend to do and what he'll try to take away, and therefore what might be there as a profitable in-game opportunity. So excellent. Nobody breaks down scenarios in rapid fire fashion here for in-game handicapping like Eric. So we thank you for that, and we will catch you on the next episode of Ingamified.